There is something about train stations late at night that makes them feel like they belong to a different world. The crowds are gone. The announcements stop. The only sounds left are the hum of cleaning machines and the echo of footsteps on marble floors. And if you ever found yourself at the Central Station in New York City around 2 in the morning, you might have seen him. An older man, maybe in his early 60s, pushing a mop bucket across the floor, his back slightly bent, his gray hair tucked under a faded cap. His eyes always looking down, as if he was afraid to meet anyone's gaze. His name was Juan, and he had worked the night shift at this station for almost 20 years. To the few security guards who knew him, he was just a quiet janitor who did his job and went home. He never complained. He never talked much. He arrived at 10 in the evening and left at 6 in the morning, and in all those years, almost no one had ever asked him a single question about his life. That was fine with him. He preferred it that way, because if anyone ever asked, he would not know where to begin. And even if he did, he was not sure he could finish without falling apart. You see, Juan was not always a janitor. There was a time, many decades ago, when his name was printed on concert programs in beautiful gold letters. There was a time when he walked onto stages in Shanghai, Beijing, and Hong Kong, and the audience would fall silent the moment he sat down at the piano. There was a time when critics called him one of the most gifted pianists of his generation. He was only 23 years old, and the whole world was waiting to hear what he would play next. But that world was gone now. It had been gone for 40 years. Juan never talked about what happened. Not to his coworkers, not to his neighbors, not to anyone. The memories were locked in a place deep inside him, and he had thrown away the key a long time ago. All anyone knew was that he came to America in his late 20s with nothing but a small suitcase and a heart full of grief. He took whatever jobs he could find. He washed dishes. He delivered newspapers. He worked in factories. And eventually, he found his way to this train station, where he had been mopping the same floors ever since. The station had a piano. It sat in the middle of the main hall, right under the big clock. It was one of those public pianos that anyone could play. During the day, all kinds of people would sit down and tap out a few notes. Sometimes it was a teenager showing off for friends. Sometimes it was a businessman killing time before his train. Sometimes it was a child pressing random keys while a parent watched and smiled. Juan had seen thousands of people play that piano over the years. And every single time, he looked away. He could not bear to watch. The sound of the keys, even from a distance, did something to him that he could not explain. It was like a hand reaching into his chest and squeezing his heart. It reminded him of everything he had lost. His mother, who had taught him his first notes when he was just 4 years old. His teacher, who had believed in him when no one else did. The concert hall in Shanghai where he gave his final performance before everything fell apart. The life he was supposed to have. The man he was supposed to become. So he avoided the piano. He cleaned around it, but never too close. He mopped the floors nearby, but always kept his eyes on the ground. For 20 years, he had not touched a single key. For 20 years, he had told himself that part of his life was over. He was no longer a pianist. He was just a janitor. And janitors do not play Chopin at 2 in the morning. But something changed on that cold night in November. Maybe it was the silence. The station was emptier than usual, and the only sound was the soft buzz of the lights overhead. Maybe it was the way the piano looked under the dim glow, like it was waiting for someone. Or maybe it was the dream he had the night before, the one where he was back on stage in Shanghai, playing for a crowd that no longer existed. Whatever it was, something pulled him toward that piano. Something he had not felt in 40 years. He stopped mopping. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the instrument from across the hall. His hands were shaking. His heart was beating so fast, he could hear it in his ears. A voice in his head told him to walk away, to go back to work, to forget about the piano and forget about the past. But another voice, quieter and deeper, told him something else. It said that he had been running for long enough. It said that some wounds do not heal by hiding them. It said that maybe, just maybe, it was time to remember who he used to be. He walked toward the piano. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he finally reached it, he just stood there, looking down at the keys. They were white and black, just like the ones he used to play as a boy, just like the ones in every concert hall he had ever performed in. He reached out and touched one key. Just one. And the note rang out in the empty station, like a bell. And then something broke inside him. It was not a bad kind of breaking. It was the kind that happens when you finally let go of something you have been holding for too long. Tears began to fall down his face. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears that rolled down his cheeks and dripped onto the piano bench. He sat down slowly, his old bones creaking, his hands still trembling. He placed his fingers on the keys, and for the first time in 40 years, he began to play. The music that came out was not perfect. His fingers were stiff, and some of the notes were wrong. But it did not matter, because the music was real. It came from somewhere deep inside him, from a place he thought was dead. He played a piece by Chopin, the same piece he had performed on the night before he left Shanghai. The same piece his mother used to hum while she cooked dinner. The same piece that had haunted his dreams for 4 decades. He did not know that someone was watching. A security guard, a young man on his break, had heard the music from down the hall. He had walked over quietly and stood in the shadows, watching this old janitor play the piano like his life depended on it. The guard did not say anything. He just pulled out his phone and pressed record. He did not know why. Maybe he thought no one would believe him if he told them. Maybe he just wanted to capture something beautiful in a world that often felt so cold. The video was only 3 minutes long. But those 3 minutes were about to change everything. By the next morning, it would be seen by millions of people around the world. News reporters would be asking questions. Strangers would be searching for the man in the video. And somewhere across the city, a young woman would see her father's face for the first time in 30 years. But Juan did not know any of that yet. In that moment, he was just a man at a piano, playing the music he thought he had forgotten. And for the first time in a very long time, he did not feel invisible anymore. Across the city, in a small apartment in Brooklyn, a young woman sat on the floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes. Her name was May, and she was 32 years old. She worked as a journalist for a small online magazine, writing stories about ordinary people with extraordinary lives. But tonight, she was not thinking about work. Tonight, she was thinking about her grandmother, who had passed away 3 weeks ago. Her grandmother had been the only family she had left. Her mother died when May was 19, taken by an illness that came fast and showed no mercy. And her father? She did not have a father. At least, that is what she had always told herself. He left when she was only 3 years old, and her mother never spoke about him. Whenever May asked questions as a child, her mother would get quiet and change the subject. Eventually, May stopped asking. She learned to live with the empty space where a father should have been. But now, sitting alone in her grandmother's apartment, she was about to discover that everything she believed was wrong. The boxes were filled with the usual things you find when someone passes away. Old clothes that still smelled like lavender. Photo albums with faded pictures. Letters written in Chinese that May could barely read. She had been sorting through them for hours, deciding what to keep and what to donate. It was exhausting work. Not because of the lifting, but because every item carried a memory. Every object reminded her that the woman who raised her was gone. She was about to take a break when she found the box hidden at the back of the closet. It was smaller than the others, wrapped in old newspaper and sealed with tape that had turned yellow with age. May almost missed it. But something about the way it was hidden made her curious. She pulled it out and set it on the floor. When she opened it, her heart stopped. Inside were cassette tapes. Dozens of them, stacked neatly in rows. Each one had a label written in her grandmother's handwriting. The labels were dates, going back more than 30 years. Beneath the tapes were concert programs, the kind you get at fancy music performances. They were printed on thick paper, with gold lettering and beautiful designs. And on every single one, the same name appeared: Huan Wei, solo piano performance. May stared at the name. She did not recognize it at first, but then she looked closer at one of the programs and saw a photograph. A young man in his 20s, sitting at a grand piano, his eyes closed, his fingers resting on the keys. He looked serious and focused, like the music was the only thing that mattered in the world. And even though the photo was old and slightly blurry, May recognized something in his face. She recognized her own eyes staring back at her. Her hands began to shake. She grabbed another program, then another. Shanghai Concert Hall, 1982. Beijing Music Festival, 1983. Hong Kong Cultural Center, 1984. The reviews printed inside called him brilliant. They called him a rising star. They said he had the kind of talent that comes along once in a generation. This was her father, the man who abandoned her. The man her mother said was a failure who could not handle responsibility. But these programs told a different story. This was not a failure. This was someone who had achieved something remarkable. So why did he leave? And why did her mother lie? May grabbed one of the cassette tapes and searched the apartment for something to play it on. She found an old tape player in another box. The kind with big buttons and a handle on top. She plugged it in, put the tape inside, and pressed play. For a moment, there was only static. Then the music started. It was piano music, soft and sad and beautiful. The kind of music that makes you feel things you cannot put into words. May sat on the floor and listened, tears running down her face without her even realizing it. She did not know the name of the piece. She did not know anything about classical music. But she knew this sound. She had heard it before, a long time ago, in a memory so faint she thought she had imagined it. Her grandmother used to hum this melody. When May was a little girl and could not sleep, her grandmother would sit by her bed and hum this exact tune. May always thought it was just a lullaby, something her grandmother made up. But it was not made up. It was her father's music. And her grandmother had been keeping it alive all these years, passing it down to May without her even knowing. She played tape after tape. Some were recordings of live performances, with applause and crowd noise in the background. Others were practice sessions, just the piano, and nothing else. In one recording, she heard a woman's voice in the background, speaking in Chinese. It took her a moment to realize it was her own mother, young and laughing, saying something May could not understand. Her father responded, and then they both laughed together. They sounded happy. They sounded in love. May did not sleep that night. She went through every item in that box, searching for answers. She found old photographs of her parents together, standing in front of concert halls and smiling at the camera. She found letters her father had written, pages and pages of words in Chinese that she would need to get translated. And at the very bottom of the box, she found a newspaper clipping from 1987. The article was short, just a few paragraphs. It talked about a young pianist who had suddenly disappeared from the music world. It said there were rumors of trouble back home in China, something involving his family. It said no one knew where he had gone, or if he would ever return to the stage. The article ended with a question that had no answer. What happened to Huan Wei? May sat back and stared at the ceiling. Her whole life, she had believed her father was a coward who ran away. But what if that was not the truth? What if he left for a different reason? What if he had no choice? She needed to find him. She needed to know the real story. The next morning, she began her search. She used every skill she had learned as a journalist. She searched public records and old news archives. She contacted music schools and concert organizations. She even reached out to people in the Chinese American community who might remember a pianist from that era. But everywhere she looked, she hit a dead end. Huan Wei had vanished completely. It was like he had erased himself from the world. Days turned into weeks. May started to lose hope. Maybe he had gone back to China. Maybe he had changed his name. Maybe he was no longer alive. She did not want to think about that last possibility, but it crept into her mind anyway. After all, he would be in his 60s now. Anything could have happened. And then, on a cold Tuesday morning, everything changed. She was sitting at her kitchen table, scrolling through her phone while eating breakfast. Her social media feed was full of the usual things: news stories, cat videos, friends posting pictures of their lunches. But then a video caught her eye. It had been shared thousands of times overnight, and the caption read, "Mystery janitor stuns train station with incredible piano performance." She almost scrolled past it, but something made her stop. She pressed play. The video was dark and grainy, filmed on someone's phone in what looked like a train station late at night. An older man was sitting at a piano, his back to the camera. He was wearing a janitor's uniform. His shoulders were hunched, and his gray hair stuck out from under a cap. He did not look like anyone special. But then he started to play. May dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the floor, but she did not even notice. She knew that music. She had been listening to it on cassette tapes for weeks, and when the camera finally caught a glimpse of the man's face, she saw what she had been searching for all along. It was him. It was her father. He was alive. He was in New York, and he had been there the whole time. May watched the video 17 times. She watched it on her phone, then on her laptop, then on her television. She paused it, rewound it, and played it again. Each time, she noticed something new. The way his fingers moved across the keys, the way his shoulders rose and fell with the music, the way he closed his eyes during the softest parts, like he was somewhere far away. She had never seen her father play before. She had only heard him on those old cassette tapes. But now, here he was, alive and real, sitting at a piano in a train station just a few miles from her apartment. She did not know what to do. Part of her wanted to run to that station right now, find him, and demand answers. But another part of her was terrified. What would she even say? "Hello, I am the daughter you abandoned 30 years ago. Why did you leave us? Why did you never come back?" The questions felt too big, too heavy, too dangerous. What if the answers broke her heart even more than the silence had? For 3 days, she did nothing. She went to work, but she could not focus. She ate dinner, but she could not taste the food. She lay in bed at night, but she could not sleep. The video played on a loop in her mind, over and over, until she thought she might go crazy. Her friends noticed something was wrong. They asked if she was okay. She smiled and said, "Yes, everything is fine." But nothing was fine. Nothing had been fine since she opened that box in her grandmother's closet. On the 4th day, she made a decision. She could not spend the rest of her life wondering. She could not carry these questions forever. She had to find him. She had to look him in the eyes and hear the truth, whatever that truth might be. Even if it hurt, even if it changed everything. She found out that the video was filmed at the Central train station in Manhattan. The comments section was filled with people trying to identify the mystery pianist. Some thought he was a homeless man. Others thought it was a publicity stunt. A few people recognized him as a janitor who worked the night shift. One comment said he usually arrived around 10 in the evening and left around 6 in the morning. That was all May needed. That night, she took the subway to the station. It was almost 11 o'clock, and the crowds were starting to thin out. She walked through the main hall, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The piano sat in the middle of the floor, empty and waiting. She looked around, searching for a janitor in a faded uniform and a gray cap. But she did not see him anywhere. She sat down on a bench and waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. She watched people come and go. She watched a teenager sit at the piano and play a pop song badly. She watched a couple take a selfie in front of the big clock. But still, no sign of her father. She started to wonder if she had made a mistake. Maybe he did not work tonight. Maybe he had quit after the video went viral. Maybe he was hiding, and then she saw him. He came out of a doorway near the back of the station, pushing a mop bucket on wheels. He was smaller than she had imagined. His back was bent, And he moved slowly, like every step took effort. He wore a dark blue uniform that was too big for him, and his gray hair poked out from under a cap that looked like it had been washed 1,000 times. He did not look like a concert pianist. He looked like exactly what he was, a tired old man doing a job that no one else wanted. May could not move. She sat frozen on the bench, watching him mop the floor in slow, careful strokes. He did not look up. He did not notice her. He just kept working, his eyes fixed on the ground, his face empty of expression. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head. She had planned exactly what she would say. But now, sitting here, watching him, all those words disappeared. She thought about her mother. She thought about all those nights when she asked about her father, and her mother looked away with pain in her eyes. She thought about her grandmother, humming that melody every night, keeping the music alive, even when the man who played it was gone. She thought about the little girl she used to be, the one who made up stories about why her father left, because the truth was too hard to face. And then she stood up. Her legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. But she forced herself to walk. One step, then another, then another. The distance between them shrank with every footstep. 20 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet. He still did not look up. He just kept mopping, lost in his own world, unaware that his entire life was about to change. She stopped right in front of him. Her shadow fell across the wet floor. He paused, his mop frozen in mid-stroke. Slowly, he raised his head, and for the first time in 30 years, father and daughter looked into each other's eyes. He did not recognize her at first. How could he? The last time he saw her, she was a baby, barely old enough to walk. But something in his face shifted. Something flickered behind his eyes, like a candle trying to stay lit in a storm. He stared at her, confused, waiting for her to speak. "I know who you are," May said. Her voice was shaking. "I saw the video. I know you were a pianist. I know you were famous. And I know." She paused, struggling to get the words out. "I know you are my father." The mop slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. His face went pale. He took a step back, like she had struck him. For a long moment, he said nothing. He just stared at her, his mouth slightly open, his eyes filling with something she could not name. Fear? Shock? Grief? All of them at once? "May," he whispered. It was barely a sound, more like a breath. But she heard it. He remembered her name. After all these years, he still remembered. "Why did you leave?" she asked. The question came out harder than she intended, sharp and angry and full of 30 years of hurt. "Why did you never come back? Why did you let us think you did not care?" He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. His whole body was trembling now. Tears began to roll down his wrinkled cheeks, falling onto his uniform, onto the floor he had just mopped. He looked so small standing there, so fragile, like a man who had been carrying a weight too heavy for one person to bear. "I wanted to come back," he finally said. His voice was rough and broken, like he had not used it for real conversation in years. "Every day, I wanted to come back. But I could not. I thought you would be safer without me. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" May demanded. "From having a father? From knowing where I came from?" He shook his head slowly, the tears still falling. "It is a long story. Too long to tell standing here. But I never stopped thinking about you. Not for one single day. I have carried your photograph in my wallet for 30 years. He reached into his pocket with trembling hands and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He opened it and showed her a small photograph, so old and faded that the colors had almost disappeared. It was a picture of a baby girl with big dark eyes and a tiny smile. It was her. May felt something crack inside her chest. All the anger, all the resentment, all the years of feeling abandoned. It was all still there. But something else was there too. Something that felt like the beginning of understanding. "I need to know everything," she said quietly. "I need to know why you left. I need to know what happened. I need to know the truth." He nodded slowly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Then I will tell you. All of it. But not here. Not like this." He looked around at the empty station, at the mop on the floor, at the life he had been living in silence for so many years. "There is a coffee shop across the street. It is open all night. Will you sit with me? Will you let me explain?" May looked at this man, this stranger who was also her father. She thought about walking away. She thought about all the reasons she should not trust him, but she also thought about those cassette tapes, and the music, and the photograph he had carried for 3 decades. "Okay," she said. "Let us talk." The coffee shop was nearly empty. Just a tired waitress behind the counter, and an old man reading a newspaper in the corner. May and her father sat across from each other in a small booth near the window. Between them were 2 cups of coffee that neither one had touched. The silence felt thick, like a wall that both of them were afraid to break. May studied his face in the light. He looked so much older than the man in those concert photographs. His skin was weathered and lined, like a map of all the years she had missed. His hands, the same hands that had once played for thousands of people, were rough and calloused from decades of hard work. But his eyes were the same, dark and deep and full of something she could not quite read. "I do not know where to begin," he said quietly. His English was good but careful, like he had to think about each word before saying it. "Start at the beginning," May replied. "Start with why you left." He nodded slowly and wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, even though it was too hot to drink. He stared at the dark liquid for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he began to speak. "When I was young, music was everything to me. My mother taught me to play when I was 4 years old. She said I had a gift, something special that came from God. By the time I was 10, I was better than most adults. By the time I was 20, I was performing in concert halls all over China. People said I would be one of the great ones. They said my name would be remembered forever." He paused, and a sad smile crossed his face. "I believed them. I was young and foolish, and I believed every word. I thought nothing could stop me. I thought I was untouchable." "What happened?" May asked softly. He took a deep breath. "In 1985, I met your mother. She was a music student in Shanghai, studying to be a singer. She was beautiful and kind, and she laughed at all my jokes, even the bad ones. I fell in love with her the first moment I saw her. Within a year, we were married. And then you came along. The happiest day of my life." "Ramers," his voice cracked on the last words. He stopped and pressed his hand against his eyes, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to fall. May waited, her heart aching, not saying a word. "But there were problems," he continued. "Things I did not tell your mother. Things I was too ashamed to admit." He looked up at May, his eyes red and wet. "My family back in our village. They were in trouble. My father had gotten involved with some dangerous people. He owed them money. A lot of money. And he could not pay. They started making threats. They said if I did not help, they would hurt my parents. They would hurt my sisters. They would hurt everyone I loved." "So, you gave them money?" May asked. He shook his head. "It was not that simple. They did not just want money. They wanted me to do things. To use my fame, my connections, to help them with their business. Illegal things, smuggling, moving money across borders. At first I refused. But then they sent men to my parents' house. They broke my father's arm. They told him the next time it would be worse." May felt her stomach tighten. She had imagined many reasons why her father might have left, but nothing like this. "I was trapped," he said. "If I helped them, I would become a criminal. If I refused, they would destroy my family. So I did what they asked. For 2 years, I did terrible things. I hated myself every single day, but I could not see any other way out. He picked up his coffee and took a sip, his hands still shaking. Then one night, everything fell apart. The authorities found out what was happening. People were arrested. Names were being given. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came for me. And if they did, they would not just take me. They would take your mother too. They would take you. Our whole family would be destroyed. So you ran, May said. It was not a question. I had no choice. A friend helped me get papers, a new identity, a ticket to America. I left in the middle of the night without saying goodbye. I told myself it was the only way to protect you. If I disappeared, if I cut all ties, then no one could connect you to me. You and your mother would be safe. You could have a normal life. Tears were streaming down his face now. But he did not wipe them away. I wrote letters. Hundreds of letters over the years. But I never sent them. I was too afraid. What if someone traced them back to you? What if my past caught up with me and put you in danger? So I stayed silent. I stayed invisible. I took jobs where no one would notice me. I became a ghost. May felt tears burning in her own eyes. All those years of anger, all those years of feeling unwanted, and the truth was so much more complicated than she ever imagined. Her father had not abandoned her because he did not care. He had abandoned her because he cared too much. Why did you never try to find us? She asked. The danger must have passed by now. It has been 30 years. He looked at her with so much pain in his eyes that it almost broke her. I was ashamed. I had been gone so long. I did not know how to come back. I thought your mother must hate me. I thought you must hate me. I thought it was better to let you believe I was a bad man than to explain what I had really done. At least then, you could move on. You could forget about me. I never forgot about you, May said quietly. And neither did grandmother. She kept all your tapes, all your concert programs. She hid them in a box in her closet. I only found them after she passed away. His face crumpled. She kept them? After all this time, she hummed your music to me every night when I was little. I did not know what it was until I found those tapes. But she never stopped. She never let go of you. Even when everyone else did. He buried his face in his hands and wept. Not quiet tears this time, but deep, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere far inside him. May reached across the table and took his hand. It felt strange, holding her father's hand for the first time in her memory, but it also felt right. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just holding on to each other. Outside, the city went about its business. Cars honked. People walked by. The world kept spinning, unaware that something important was happening in this little coffee shop. Finally, he looked up and wiped his face with a napkin. The video, he said. The one from the station. It has caused problems. People are looking for me now. Reporters. News people. They want to know who I am. They want to tell my story. I know, May said. I have seen the messages online. Everyone wants to find the mystery pianist. He shook his head slowly. I have spent 40 years hiding. I do not know if I can stop now. I do not know if I am ready. May squeezed his hand. You do not have to decide tonight. But I want you to know something. Whatever you choose, whatever happens next, I am glad I found you. I am glad I know the truth, and I do not hate you. I could never hate you. He looked at her like she had given him something precious, something he had been waiting for his whole life. You have your mother's heart, he whispered. She would be so proud of you. They talked until the sun came up. They talked about the years they had missed, the memories they never made, the future they might still have together. It was not easy. There was still pain, still questions, still wounds that would take time to heal. But for the first time in 30 years, they were not strangers anymore. And somewhere in the back of her mind, May began to form an idea. A way to give her father something he had lost long ago. A way to bring his story out of the shadows and into the light. She did not say anything yet, but she knew what she had to do. The weeks that followed were not easy. Healing never is. May and her father met almost every day, sometimes at the coffee shop, sometimes at her apartment, sometimes just walking through the park near the train station. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps of 30 years apart. He told her about his life in America. The loneliness, the silence, the way he used to stand outside concert halls just to hear the music coming from inside. She told him about growing up without him. The questions she could never answer. The empty space at every school, play, and birthday party. There were hard moments. Times when old anger bubbled up and May could not hold it back. Times when her father went quiet, and she could see the shame eating him alive. But they kept showing up. They kept talking, they kept trying, and slowly, something that had been broken for 3 decades began to mend. The video, meanwhile, had taken on a life of its own. News stations around the world picked up the story. The mystery janitor who played like a concert pianist. Journalists dug into his past and discovered fragments of his old life in China. The headlines called it a story of lost talent, hidden genius, a man who gave up everything and disappeared. What they did not know was the full truth. They did not know about the danger, the impossible choices. The daughter who had finally found him after all these years. May watched the coverage with mixed feelings. Part of her wanted to protect her father, to keep him hidden from the spotlight he had avoided for so long. But another part of her saw something else. She saw how his face changed when he talked about music. She saw the way his hands moved when he described a piece he loved, like they were playing invisible keys in the air. She saw a man who had buried the best part of himself and was still grieving the loss. One evening, she asked him a question that had been on her mind for weeks. Do you miss it? Performing, I mean. Being on stage. He was quiet for a long time. They were sitting on her small balcony, watching the sun go down over the city. Finally, he spoke. Every single day. Music was not just something I did. It was who I was. When I stopped playing, I lost myself. I have been trying to find my way back ever since. Then maybe it is time, May said carefully. Maybe it is time to stop hiding. He looked at her, confused. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. A producer from a television show contacted me. They want to do a story about you. Not just the video, but the whole story. Who you were, what happened, how you ended up here. They want you to perform live on the show, in front of millions of people. His face went pale. I cannot do that. It has been too long. I am not the same person I was. My fingers are stiff. My memory is not what it used to be. I would make a fool of myself. You would not, May said firmly. I have heard you play. That night at the station, even on those old cassette tapes, your gift is still there. It never left. You just stopped believing in it. He shook his head, but she could see something shifting in his eyes. Fear, yes, but also something else. A tiny spark of hope that he was trying very hard to hide. I will be there with you, she continued. Right beside you on that stage. I will turn the pages for you. Just like you used to do for your mother when you were a boy. You told me that story. Remember? How she would play, and you would sit next to her and turn the pages of her sheet music. You said it made you feel like you were part of something beautiful. Tears welled up in his eyes. You would do that? After everything? You are my father, May said simply. I spent 30 years looking for you. I am not going to let you disappear again. It took 2 more weeks to convince him. There were moments when he almost backed out, when the fear was too strong and he wanted to run. But May stayed patient. She reminded him of who he used to be. She played those old cassette tapes and watched his face soften as he listened to his younger self. She told him that this was not about proving anything to the world. It was about reclaiming something that had been taken from him. It was about coming home. The night of the performance arrived faster than either of them expected. The television studio was bright and overwhelming, full of cameras and technicians and people rushing around with clipboards. May's father looked terrified. He was wearing a simple dark suit that May had helped him pick out, and his hands were trembling as they waited backstage. "I cannot do this," he whispered. "I cannot remember the notes. My mind is blank." May took his hands in hers and held them steady. "Look at me," she said. "You have played this piece 1,000 times. Your hands remember even when your mind forgets. Just close your eyes and let the music come back to you. I will be right there. I am not going anywhere." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, took a deep breath, and walked out onto the stage. The audience fell silent as he sat down at the grand piano. The host had already told his story, shown clips from the viral video, explained how his daughter had found him after 30 years. People in the crowd were already wiping their eyes, but none of that mattered now. All that mattered was the man at the piano and the music he was about to play. May sat beside him on a small chair, the sheet music open on the stand in front of them. She could see his hands shaking as he placed them on the keys. She could hear him breathing, slow and unsteady. The whole studio seemed to hold its breath, and then he began to play. The first notes filled the room like light breaking through clouds. It was Chopin. The same piece he had played that night at the train station. The same piece his mother used to hum when he was a child. But this time, it was different. This time, there was no hiding, no shame, no fear. Just the music, pure and beautiful, pouring out of him like water from a spring. May turned the pages when he needed her to, but mostly she just watched. She watched his face transform as the music took over. She watched the years fall away from him. The pain and loneliness and regret melting into something else. She watched her father become himself again. The audience was silent, completely still, as if they were afraid to breathe. Some people were crying openly. Others sat with their hands over their mouths, overwhelmed by what they were witnessing. The cameras captured every moment, but no recording could truly capture what it felt like to be in that room. When the final note faded into silence, no one moved. For a long moment, there was nothing but stillness. And then the applause began. It started slowly. A few hands clapping, then more, then everyone at once. People rose to their feet. The sound was deafening, wave after wave of applause that seemed to shake the walls. But May was not looking at the crowd. She was looking at her father. He was sitting at the piano with tears streaming down his face. But he was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since she had met him. He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw something she had been searching for her whole life. He reached out and took her hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for finding me." May squeezed his hand and smiled back through her own tears. "Thank you for letting me." The applause continued, but neither of them heard it anymore. In that moment, surrounded by strangers and cameras and bright lights, they were not performers on a stage. They were just a father and daughter, finally together, finally home. Some stories do not have perfect endings. Some wounds never fully heal. But sometimes, if you are brave enough to try, you can find your way back to the people you love, and sometimes, that is enough.